we're going to see if my doggy will stay with her. And if he doesn't, he might come up here with me. All right. I was here 3 years ago, this weekend, by the way. And the reason I know that, he's actually doing fairly well. Stay there, Feifel. I'm going to meet him in a minute. So he's going to stay there and then come up here and probably stay with me. He doesn't like Logan. I don't know what that says. We're not going to judge that, right? But he likes Miss Allison? Alexis. I'm sorry, Alexis. Okay. But I was here 3 years ago this weekend because 3 years ago this weekend was the weekend my mother got she had been ill. Some of y'all might remember that. But 3 years ago, next weekend, was the weekend my mom passed away. I don't know if Logan shared that with you. So this is kind of a symbiotic weekend for me. So that's how I remember all these things. And I don't know if Logan told you, but I remember everything Logan has ever done. But he's like, oh. And he used to oversleep a lot for my classes. So come up here, come up here. Feifel, I adopted Feifel, and actually we rescued each other. And right after my mom died, and I tell people we rescued each other. And I'm actually going to use Feifel in my presentation because he actually, don't watch him, watch me. But and there is a reason I'm going to use him. But anyway, but what I want to share with you with the time I have, and I'll try not to use up all of your time, Logan, is about holding the ropes with Tzedakah Ministries, because I know that there were a question a few months ago about what Tzedakah Ministries was doing now, and I'm so glad to be able to share with you about what Tzedakah Ministries is doing now. Because, go to the next slide, because there's a quote by the father of modern missions, William Carey. It says, I will go down, and the idea is I will go down into the mines of missions, the salt mines, the mines, if you will hold the ropes. Because missionaries cannot do the work of missions without you. And it's the idea of synergy is we have to work together in missions if we want to reach the Jewish people or any people group. I can't do it alone without you. Stay still, Feifel. I can't do it alone. No missionary can do the work of missions without working together with Christians and churches. If missionaries, if you've ever gone and said, how can we help you? And the missionary says, well, just pray for me, brother. Then they're not doing what missions should do and what missionaries should do. Because no missionary just needs your prayers. If they ever say, just pray for me, brother, or pray for me, sister, then they're not telling you the truth. Missionaries need more than just your prayers. And I want to share that with you today. Could you go to the next slide? Because this is basically the essence of what missionaries need. We need you to be not only just to support the work, we need you to be a fellow worker in the work. And I really thought about what I was going to say to you today and what I was going to share with you today. But you can bark at Logan. Because I really wanted to share with you what I said later, Feifel. But stop. Because I really wanted to share with you about what I was going to about what's going on in upstate New York. Because, could you go to the next slide for me? Because I want you to understand the need of what's going on in upstate New York. And because a lot of people think about the Hasidic people and what's going on with the Hasidic people, because when you think about the Hasidic people, you think that they all live in Israel. They don't live all in Israel. And you think about them at the Western Wall, and they're so religious, and they're so spiritual, and they're so godly. And in one respect, they are. But if you think about Romans 10:1-4, and I don't have that handy, and I'm not going to turn and ask you to turn to it. Logan, if he wants to, can read that later. But it says the idea is that they have an essence of godliness, but not the full power thereof. Because that's what they are. They have a zeal for God, but not the real power of it. Because where I live, and I'm going to show you a map of that in just a minute. Don't turn to it yet, okay? There's about 50 to 75,000 people in just the small 30 to 50 mile area of where I live. And because a lot of people think of the Hasidic people, and that's the ultra-Orthodox people. And I'll show you that on a map in just a minute. And most people think that they all live in Jerusalem or they all live in Brooklyn, New York, but they're leaving that area and they're moving to where I live because Brooklyn, the increase of anti-Semitism is increasing rapidly. And they're moving to where I live, and I wanted to share with you something else. The average Hasidic home or the average ultra-Orthodox home has between 8 and 14 children. Now, I saw that face you just made. I saw that face. Now, look at your husband and say, I'm not having 8 and 14 children. And the husband said, amen. And I want to share with you something else. The average Hasidic woman doesn't get to say to her husband, I'm not having 8 and 14 children. The husband doesn't get to say, we can stop having 8 and 14 children. They have to go to the rabbi and say, can we stop having children? The rabbi gets to tell them when they can stop or start having children. Yeah. I saw the lady in the red shirt. What's your name on the back row in the red shirt? What's your name? Marilyn? Is that Mary Lou? I'm sorry. Can you imagine having to go to Pastor Logan saying, can we stop having children now? You don't have a lot of power here, Pastor Logan. Because that's why I'm saying they're expecting an increase of between 10 and 25,000 in where I live, because they're moving from Brooklyn and they're having a bunch more children. And they're having to go to their rabbi to ask if they can stop having children. It doesn't matter if the woman is having difficulty having children, because after 14 kids, they're having a little trouble physically. And Tzedakah Ministries is the only ministry to Jewish people in the entire area where I live, which means I am the only missionary in the entire area of where I live. And I want you to understand, and I've shared this with you just on a large global area, that between 97 and 99% of all Jewish people in the world are lost. Among the Hasidic people, 99.5 ultra-Orthodox Jewish people are lost. Now think about that number. Could you go to the next slide? Because this is the map that I wanted you to understand. You see the red cross? That is where I live. Okay? And you see the little star up in the corner that's almost getting lost? That's one enclave. Logan, could you be my little... I guess he's going to get me a stick. Okay, thank you. That's one area. He's going to be my pointy person for me. He's going to be my Vanna. Okay? Could you go to where it says in the corner right there. No, keep going. There you go. Where it says Monticello. There's about 1,000 Hasidic Jews in a town called Lake Kamisha. You have to look to find that. Even if you drive up there, you have to know how to find it. No evangelist or no missionary to Jewish people have ever been there, except for me. If you go to where that says Middletown, right there, there's about 1,500 Jewish people in a town called Bloomingburg. No one ever knew that they were there until I found it by accident. If you go to where those 2 stars are, that's Curious Joel, and I'm going to show you a video of Curious Joel in a town called Seven Springs. There are about 36,000 ultra-Orthodox people in the town of Curious Joel. If you are not Jewish or not Hasidic, you can't live in Curious Joel. They won't let you. But if you see where I live, where the Red Cross is, I live about 6 miles from Curious Joel. I can drive in there. I can drive out of there. I can drop stuff off there. I can talk to the women who live there. I just can't live there. Now, if you go down a little bit south of Curious Joel, there are 3 enclaves of between 5,000 and 20,000 people in a town called Karas, a town called New Square, and a town called Monsey. So between Lake Kamisha, Bloomingburg, Curious Joel, Seven Springs, Karas, Monsey, I forgot the name of the other town, New Square, there's 7 enclaves of Hasidic people. I'm the only missionary in that entire 50 square mile, basically. And I'm the only missionary. And none of them have ever been exposed to the gospel. Now, the reason I'm sharing all of that with you is I'm one person. I can't do it alone. Could you go to the next slide for me? And so people ask me, well, don't they just have faith? Well, you have to understand what they understand. What does faith mean to the Hasidic people? Faith means, for Hasidic people, we understand faith of just forsaking all, I trust him. Just trusting God, believing God. For the Hasidic people, and I wrote this definition because I wanted you to understand it, is just believe and don't question anything. Have you ever had doubts? Have you ever questioned and went, do I really believe what I believe? And have you ever had questions about your faith? I have. I'll be honest. I've had questions. I've wondered, can I really believe what I believe? Is it true? I've had questions. In Hasidic Judaism, if you have questions, you are considered a heretic. Don't have questions. Never have questions about anything. Don't question. Obedience over understanding. Mold the children to obey even if they do not. What does that sound like to you? Oh, just obey. Don't question. Just no questions. Radical obedience even if you don't want to obey. What does that sound like to you? If some of you want to say something out loud, it's okay. You're smirking, so it's a dictatorship. Does anybody else have a word that they want to say? What? Tyranny. On a religious sense, what does that sound like to you? Who said it? It's a cult. It is a cult. It's Judaism, but it's a cult. It is a cult. Go to the next slide for me. Because you're wondering, why did I bring toilet paper inside the auditorium, aren't you? Because they have this great fear of accidentally disobeying a rule. I'm going to give you an example. This is my favorite example. What is the rule about the Sabbath? Not to work on the Sabbath, right? We all understand. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. I borrowed this from one of your bathrooms, so forgive me, okay? But so what do you think it means to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy? Don't work, right? And for you it's like rest on the Sabbath. I almost dropped that. By the way, he will eat toilet paper, so that's why I'm trying to be good. You know what work on the Sabbath is for the Hasidic Jewish people? I'm going to show you what working on the Sabbath. Can you still hear me a little bit? I just worked on the Sabbath. Tearing toilet paper on the Sabbath is work. Now, in the scripture, does it say anything about tearing toilet paper on the Sabbath as work? Who made that up? Men. They are, and I'm not going to read that definition for you. You can read that for yourself. But they are so afraid of accidentally breaking a law of the Torah, of the scripture, that they created so many extra laws that they made that work. I have been in Dollar Tree. Yes, there are Dollar Trees in New York. And yes, there are Dollar Generals in New York. I swear, if we ever get it to Mars, there's going to be a Dollar General on Mars before we get there. But I have been in Dollar Tree on Friday morning or Friday afternoon, and you know how they get away with not tearing toilet paper on the Sabbath? They buy Kleenex boxes because it's already pre-torn. And I have seen them buy a cartload for their 8 to 14 children, remember? And buy a cartload of toilet paper to get through the Sabbath. Is that what honor the Sabbath and keep it holy is all about? Is that honoring the Sabbath? Or is that being so afraid of breaking the Sabbath that they've created extra work for themselves? Because of what man has done to them of creating more work than honoring God. And so they've created for themselves, what have we already said it is? A cult. Can you find salvation in a cult? That's why 99.5 of them are lost. So who are the type of people, I'm still going to use him as an illustration. Who are the type of people, could you go to the next slide? Who are the type of the people that want to leave? The ones who are questioners, like, is that really work? The questioners are the kinds that are most easily reached with the gospel. The dreamers, those who want to dream of a better life. Those who don't want to have the 8 to 14 children. Those who want to have something more for their lives. The closet unbelievers. I met a young man, his name is, well, he's not young, he's younger than me, who he has 11 children, and he's a butcher. And so that means he has to be the butcher for the entire community. Can you imagine trying to be the butcher for the entire community? I'm not going to tell you his name, but, and you can tell he doesn't really believe it, but he's the butcher for the entire community of Curious Joel. And so he works 20-hour days. And he has 11 children that he has to support. And his daughter just got married, and she married a seminary boy which means her husband doesn't work because all he does all day is study at the seminary. He's a yeshiva boy. That's a term. And so he's trapped by tradition and marriage and obligation. And so he's trapped, and he really doesn't believe it anymore, but he's trapped, and he would love to get out, but he's stuck. And then the abused ones, because there's lots of spousal abuse in a Hasidic community, but they just don't talk about it. There's lots of domestic abuse in the Hasidic community, but they just don't talk about it. There's lots of sexual abuse in the Hasidic community, but they just don't talk about it. So these are the kinds of people that are easy to reach if we can just have more help from people like you. Because I can't do it by myself. And I have tried. Tzedakah Ministries started in September reaching out to Hasidic women by just offering school supplies and diaper supplies and ways of reaching. And we were doing a good job. We were starting to make inroads into the Hasidic community by just offering school supplies, because those are expensive. And diaper supplies. We started that last September. And in May, the rabbi and his wife found out what we were doing. And they told the women in the community, if you accept anything from that church lady, we'll make sure that your children will never get married. So the women are afraid to take any more supplies from us. And so we're having to start all over again. But these women need help because they're the ones that are getting abused. These are the women that are getting assaulted. It's their children that are not getting the proper education. And you're going to see a video in a few moments. They'll explain it later. Because the education that these people are getting isn't even the equivalent of a high school GED. So they're trapped in their communities. Because, thank you, you understood what I was going to next, so good job. So go to the next slide. And so we were making inroads into the community, and that's actually where FIFO came in. Because a dog in the Hasidic community is not considered kosher. But FIFO was a great conversation starter. When I would bring FIFO, they're not allowed to have dogs. But FIFO was a wonderful conversation starter because he's cute. And people loved, when I would hold him, people would love to pet him and talk to me because I had him in my arms. And people would start telling me secrets about their life, like they were diabetic. And they wanted to have more of a life for their children. And they didn't want their children to be forced into forced marriages. Because forced marriages are very common in the Hasidic community, often beginning as young as 15 and 16. And so we need prayer warriors. We need prayer walks. And so maybe if you want to be a part of coming to New York and joining with me as we walk the neighborhoods and just do prayer walks. If you've ever wanted to go, the smoke is clearing away, by the way. If you ever just want to come to New York and see what the work is like and just do a prayer walk with me. And to maybe as we start passing out the diapers again and to start doing and the other supplies that we gave, the school supplies and the prayer walks. And we also want to expand to Blooming. I meant to write Bloomingburg and I messed that up. And because we were doing it in Kiryas Joel, but we want to expand to Bloomingburg and to Lake Kamisha and to Kaiser. But we need more volunteers. We need more supplies. Because I can't do it alone. And as I said earlier, if a missionary only says, just pray for me, brother, they're not being honest with you. Because we need more than just prayer. We need prayer, but we also need you to be involved with us in the work. We cannot do it. Could you go to the next slide? Because I want you to remember that map. Because I live at the Red Cross, but those 7 towns have never been touched with the gospel. And I cannot do it alone. Go to the last slide. Because if you go into Curious Joel, you're going to see this sign. You know, in keeping with our traditions and religious customs, wear long skirts or pants, cover your neckline, sleeves past the elbow, use appropriate language, and maintain gender separation at all times. So, girls have to walk on one side of the street, or women have to walk on one side of the street, and men have to walk on the other side of the street. Yes, even if you're married. Because, ma'am, how long have you two been married? You cannot walk on the street together. And you most certainly cannot hold hands. And I heard you. I'm sorry, that's why I laughed. So, but you know what? The most bottom line thing about Curious Joel is that 99.5% of them have never heard that Jesus is their Messiah. I'm almost ready, okay? I once had a conversation with a lady who lives in Curious Joel, and we were just talking, and it was raining, kind of like it's starting to do today, and I said something about, you know, Noah, and she looked at me like, you know who Noah is? I said, yeah, I know who Noah is. Because she didn't realize that Christians knew who Noah was. And I said, yeah, I believe in Noah. I believe in Genesis. I believe that God created the world in 6 days. And she's like, well, you believe in creation like we believe in creation. I said, I most certainly do. I believe in the flood. I believe in creation. I believe when God said in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, he created it just like he said he did. And she goes, I don't know, Christians believe like we do. And I said, you might be surprised how much we have in common. The only real difference is you know who. And she said, yeah. And she looked at me and she goes, there's really only him that we have in different. Because she's afraid to say his name. And I said, yeah, it's really only him we have different. She goes, I didn't know that. And I was reading, because they don't have Whataburger, which is a sin, by the way. They don't have a Whataburger in New York. So I have to go to Dunkin' Donuts now. And I was reading my Bible, and I have my iPad for my Bible, and I was reading out of Jonah that day. And one of the Hasidic ladies came in to get coffee. They can't get a donut, but they can get coffee. And she looked over my shoulder and she said, y'all have Jonah in your Bible? And I said, yeah, we have Jonah. We have Amos. We even have the book of Psalms. And she goes, I didn't know y'all had all those books in y'all's Bible too. You know why? Because no one has told them. And then she realized I read Hebrew. I read in Hebrew, Logan. She goes, you probably read Hebrew better than I do. And I said, I probably do. Because nobody has told them. But I need your help to be able to tell them that. There's going to be like a 3-minute video, and then Logan, it's up for you.
I've decided that that's probably the most organic way to grow a church. And so, Miss Nell, I know that y'all been married for 60 years, but we're going to start praying for an Abraham and Sarah moment for you. Schwins, y'all aren't off the hook either.